Hey everybody, I've got a fantastic video for you today because I'm out here at the Goodwood Festival of Speed checking out the new Hyundai Ioniq 5N, the first ever fully electric Hyundai N car and the high performance version of the Ioniq 5. I can't wait to show you this car. Let's talk about the design of the Hyundai Ioniq 5N. Now I have a very limited amount of time with this vehicle. We're here at the Goodwood Festival of Speed. Alex Stykes there from Alex on Autos is going to be poking his head in and out as well because he's trying to do his video. But Hyundai is making a big deal about the Ioniq 5N because this is their first ever electrified N model. And if you see that little N on the front or the rear of a Hyundai, it typically means something very, very special. They launched the brand with the Veloster N. Then, of course, we saw the Elantra and the Kona, and all of these models are high-performance versions of small, nimble vehicles. And now they're extending the N brand to the all-electric Ioniq 5, the first ever fully electric N car. So they had to make it look the part. Now let's talk about this color, Performance Blue. It's the first time you've ever been able to get this light blue in a matte finish, and it really, I think, elevates the look of this car and helps it make it look more like a Tron car than it already did, which is pretty much saying something because this car is, when it launched a number of years ago, was so futuristic. The Ioniq 5 introduced this new pixel design strategy by Hyundai with these little square dots throughout the vehicle. And having this kind of matte color just helps make it look even more futuristic than it already does. Now let's talk about some of the changes. The front of the vehicle, you've got this continuous panel that makes its way from the left to the right of the vehicle. In the standard Ioniq 5, this is just a design trim piece. In the new Ioniq 5N, this is a functional grille inlet. So one of the big challenges that the Hyundai team faced with building this car is making a car that's able to sustain high-speed track use without immediately derating, without overheating. And one of the primary ways they were able to do that is by revising the entire cooling system. It's got new radiators. It's also got a new cooling loop, so the battery and the drivetrain components are in separate cooling loops now. And there's even a special mode to help sustain higher speeds without having the battery derate itself and slow the vehicle down. But across the front here also really cool uses of aerodynamics with these little vents that help direct air down the side of the vehicle, more air intakes, and then you've got this orange bar across the front of the vehicle that helps accentuate the length and the width of the car, continues all the way down the side, similar to what Volkswagen really started in the 80s with the Golf GTI. N badging down the side here, and we got to talk about the wheel and brake package. This is a pretty serious setup. P0 tires, 275/35 ZR21, so a large wheel hiding 15.7-inch discs in the front there with the orange brake caliper. And then as we make our way to the rear, we're going to find a 275/35 ZR21 rear tire in the back, which once again, huge tire all around on this car. So let's talk about that power number. A peak of 641 horsepower in a new mode they're calling N-Grin Boost. Now sustained is 601, but for short periods you can plant your foot to the ground and get a maximum of 641 horsepower. There's also a number of different drive modes, including launch modes, that will propel this vehicle from 0 to 60 in right around 3.5 seconds. So this thing is a screamer when it comes to straight line performance. Interestingly enough, the sheet metal is the same between this car and the standard car. They've achieved the width through a lot of the plastic trim like the side molding and of course the vents down the side, but there are mechanical changes. It has a two-piece aluminum lower front control arm versus the standard car, which is of course steel. It has adaptive dampers all the way around, and it has a lot more power. Now stepping inside the Ioniq 5N, you are greeted by an interior which really differentiates itself from the standard Ioniq 5. So the Ioniq 5 has a really interesting interior, very luxurious, but the N here has brought it up a notch or 12, starting with these phenomenal bucket seats. Now this is a manual seat design, seat slides back like that, but look at the bolstering on these seats. So much more aggressive than the standard car, help you stay in place, but the bolstering isn't so dramatic where it's going to be hard to get in and out. So like some of the new performance seats from BMW, from Porsche, have such firm carbon buckets here that getting in and out could be a massive chore, but not in the Ioniq 5N. You also have a throwback to race cars, of course, where you could put a 5-point harness. Now as we step into the Ioniq 5N, first thing you notice is an all-new steering wheel on this model with buttons for drive modes. There's your N-Grin boost or overboost functionality, and then a couple of different shortcuts here so you can have custom modes. And what we're hearing there is actually simulated sound. What do you think of that? So this vehicle has a number of different simulated sounds that you can activate. This is an electric car. You can both rev and shift. The new Hyundai Ioniq 5N has 3 different sound modes and a simulated tachometer with 8 simulated speeds. This is the ignition mode. There's also an evolution setting. And one called supersonic that sounds like a jet. And you can see there's actually a red line, and that's because this car has a simulated transmission. So there's a mode you can engage which activates a simulated 8-speed automatic transmission. And at the push of a paddle, you can actually change gears. Now this is not just something that's like, oh look, it moves on the tack. The motors actually reduce motor torque when you hit the red line, and then when you upshift, the car will accelerate again. It's possible to bog the Ioniq 5N if you are in a higher gear than you're supposed to be, which is berserk, and you can even hit a fuel shutoff if you run into the red line. Now, Hyundai is doing this to try and improve the electric experience. They want this car to be more than just a standard EV without much character. This is designed to really give you a better experience, at least is that what they're claiming, than a standard car, and also bring in some excitement into the EV world. Of course, you can turn it off if you don't want it, and I've been talking to some of the engineers. They say that the average driver, even a good driver, is typically significantly faster around the track using the paddle shift functionality in the Ioniq 5N than just having it run in the single-speed electric mode, because you know, consumers are used to the sensation and the speed associated with RPMs and gear changes. So apparently that's the story with the shifting. Let me know what you think in the comment section below.
We started just with sound. And it was nice, but after a few months we conclude it's not enough. Then we added little vibrations to it. Yeah, makes it better, but still there's something is missing here. And then I asked a crazy question, why can't we do gear shifts? And I put the same engineer who developed this shift application of the double clutch transmission. And the same engineer I put in charge to make the virtual gear shift. Yeah. So, and of course it was not easy, and to synchronize this torque management, this is what it is all about, torque management, and also then the sound, because we wanted to bring traditional high-performance customers into our first NEV, because that is the responsibility also we have. If we want to claim we are the good ones, we make sustainable fun to drive, you have to lure them in with something. And just sound was clear is not enough. So then bringing shifting, torque management, with drag torque, with a shift jolt, right? So you really work with the car. Like with the combustion car, the drag torque, when you downshift, right? The car slows down, depending in every gear it's different. Like in a normal DCT car, the handover, of course, we don't have 2 clutches to make the push feel, but we manage the torque, we reduce the torque a little bit. So we always need some torque in the pocket. So we have a peak torque, like in a combustion car, and then we reduce a little bit, and then we need some leftover torque, and so we make the push feel, right? And that makes you somewhat slower. But who cares about speed or lap time? It's all about fun.
It's pretty darn pretty darn controversial as to what Hyundai's done. So other things on the interior, you've got the large dual screens here. We've got so many different modes. There's a drift optimizer, which will give you a shot of torque to the rear end to help you drift. There's a bunch of different end pedals, so you can actually have a few different regen modes on the brakes of this car, one designed for track use. And there's also these settings, to precondition the battery so that you can have it maintain slightly less power but longer track times than you would be able to in the maximum power mode, which I think is really, really interesting. So lots of work done toward track performance. They also have a computer in here which will tell you what percentage you're using per lap to help you optimize your power usage. And it has a larger battery, an 87 kilowatt hour battery, than the standard car. Even in the heads-up display, they have the RPM, which is just nuts. So some other things, the center console here is fixed in the Ioniq 5N with a place here to brace your knee for high-speed cornering. USB-C port here, NFC capability with wireless charging there. And of course, this vehicle does also have V2L capability. There's a little slot at the bottom there, and you can charge up devices. You can also potentially power stuff in your home in the event of a power outage, which is all pretty cool. But overall, pretty impressed with the interior of this car. You know, your standard Hyundai climate control down here. You got your buttons, your home buttons, all that down here. Your shifter here, a couple of stocks. It's just the steering wheel, which is so radically different than what we've seen from other Hyundais. Now, some things I'm not as impressed with the Ioniq 5, and I wish you got all 641 horsepower anytime you put the pedal to the floor without having to engage the N-Grin boost mode. I know you get that additional 40, and once again, it's an over boost functionality feature, but I always like having all the power on tap. I'm also not really sure what the range of this car is going to be with these massive tires, the performance suspension, right? The performance-oriented design. Is this really going to exceed 250 on the range number? We'll have to wait and see until we get official EPA numbers. And I'm also worried about the price, right? This competes with vehicles like the Mach-E GT and the the Tesla Model Y Performance, and of course the sister car to this, the Kia EV6 GT. So I'm thinking pricing's probably going to be low 60s through maybe mid 70s or high 60s, somewhere in that territory, at least when it goes on sale in the US.
We never had a discussion about racetrack driving for EV6 GT. It is a GT, it's not a high performance car. And in my definition from the start with Hyundai N, there can never be a discussion if a Hyundai N car can be racetrack capable or not. If it's not racetrack capable, it cannot be an N car. So, and then the development job is a lot easier. Yeah, and the substance you have to put in a car to make it racetrack capable, it's a whole different game. Yep. You cannot compare. So, and this is the fundamental difference between those two cars. Although the EV6 GT can also survive pretty long and pretty good on the racetrack, yeah, better than almost all other EVs. It's already damn good. Yeah. But the way, the talent it has on the track, it's a whole different game. You cannot compare. We have not developed this EV6 GT for racetrack driving. It of course does already very good racetrack driving, but once you have the opportunity to drive Ioniq 5N, within a minute you can tell the difference.
Hopping into the back seat of the Ioniq 5N, let's see what the rear seat looks like. Well, first and foremost, knee room feels very good. Man, having this car idle is such a weird thing. 1,000 RPM, you can see the rev counter bouncing up and down. There we go. Let's turn that off for a sec. Oh, I have to go on the screen. I can't reach it. Well, the car is just going to be idling a little bit in the background, but the end seats are much more prominent in the front than in the back. So the rear bench, very similar to what you're going to find on any other Ioniq 5. You get the little, design there down the door panel. Heated rear seats on this model, which is a really nice touch. And if you see back there, it also has an integrated camera mirror. And of course, the sunshade here. And let's see what the trunk looks like in the Ioniq 5N. Power liftgate. Yep, power liftgate opens up nicely there. Yeah, lots of room. Any under seat storage here? Little bits. Got some charging kit, got some tire repair kits there, and then the seats do fold down, and you have your view blocker here. So pretty standard looking trunk. So what do you think, guys? The Ioniq 5N making its debut here at the Goodwood Festival of Speed. 641 horsepower in 3.5 seconds to 60. Availability is Q1 of 2024. So coming up in the winter of 2024 is when you should be able to start taking delivery of your Ioniq 5N. Now, as I mentioned, we don't know price and we don't know the range numbers, but on paper, this thing looks like a beast. I can't wait to try out that ever controversial 8-speed paddle shift transmission and see what it's really like. I'd love to hear your opinion on having different rev modes and different sound modes. And as always, has been Tommy. Behind the camera, Alex from Auto Buyer's Guide. He's been helping me out a lot on this shoot. We'll see you on the next video.